Every city has a heartbeat. Most people only hear it during the day. Traffic, laughter, footsteps, life moving forward. But after dark, there's another pulse. One that remembers what happened before the streetlights, before the hotels, before the postcards and tourist brochures told us what these places were supposed to be. Tonight, we're following the whispers most people walk past without ever realizing they've been warned. From restless spirits that refuse to leave, to legends that never asked to become myths, to locations that feel different the moment you step onto the sidewalk. Somebody knows these stories because they walk with them every single night. Mike Huberty is the man behind American Ghost Walks, one of the most respected paranormal tour companies in the country. From Alaska to Hawaii, Minnesota to Maine, Puerto Rico to the Virgin Islands, Mike doesn't just tell ghost stories, he ties history to the shadows that never left. These aren't campfire tales, my darklings. These are the stories cities try to forget, and the ones the dead refuse to let go. I'm Dave Schrader, and tonight we take a walk where the past is still watching. This is the Paranormal 60.
I'm not gonna stand here and listen to this baloney. He won't float. He doesn't stand for baloney.
Sounds like a lot of supernatural baloney to me.
Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not.
Good evening, my darklings. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening. Hey, something pretty exciting. For those of you that have already subscribed to Stream Beacon TV, you may have missed a special that came out. That's right. Cindy, Shane, and I got together for an evening with the spirits. We were live at the Helium Comedy Club, and we were there talking behind-the-scenes stories from Holzer Files, Ghosts of Devil's Perch, and Paranormal Mysteries, and a lot of fun. Great audience, so much interaction, a lot of interesting stories. So if you missed it, go check An Evening with the Spirits. You can watch it on Stream Beacon TV right now. Let's dive into tonight's topic. Obviously, I am interested in the hauntings and history all around the world. As a matter of fact, if you tuned into my show last night on Paranormal 360, you heard me talking with Joshua Hurd of Malvern Manor. And then I spent a little time talking about another interesting place, Daniel Klass with the haunted Hinsdale House. And that, if you haven't caught that show, check it out. Two amazing locations, lots of history, lots of high strangeness. If you haven't already subscribed, it's very easy. Wherever you listen to this audio podcast, you can also check out that one. Just look up Paranormal 360, and you'll be able to find the Paranormal 360. Subscribe, it's free. And the nice thing is all the commercials and news have been edited out. So get about 35 minutes of content each hour for the 2-hour show. So all told, you're about an hour and 10 in, and you get just to the meat of these stories. And I think you're going to absolutely love it. But tonight I wanted to take a broader, bigger look and perspective of haunted locations around the United States and surrounding territories, because there are so many great places to visit. Some maybe you don't even know about, things that haven't pinged your radar, like the Villisca Axe Murder House and Malvern Manor, or the Stanley Hotel, the Queen Mary Eastern State Penitentiary. Those have got all the flourish and all the highlights. But there are some places out there and some stories that definitely need to be heard. And this is the guy that I go to, because he is out there beating the streets, learning the stories, and he has got the American Ghost Walks. They are all around, and he's here to share some of those stories with us this evening. Mike Huberty. Mike, welcome back to the program.
Yeah, Dave, it's a pleasure to be with you on this wonderful wintry Monday night, coming at you from Madison, Wisconsin, itself a wonderfully weird city in the Midwest.
It's so funny to me. You know, you think, okay, East Coast, sure, that's going to be one of the older settled areas. West Coast, you had all the booms of the gold rushes and everything. I could understand why those would be so haunted. But it's really kind of fascinating to me how much of the Midwest has this mystery and allure to it, and really seems to draw people in, and the spirits stay here. Like I said, you're everywhere from Minnesota to Maine, Arkansas, or Alaska to Hawaii, but what do you think it is about the Midwest, kind of the heart of the country, that has such a strange and rich paranormal tapestry?
Um, I think it's because it gets cold. We got nothing else to do but tell ghost stories. Um, but really, it's the confluence of cultures. It's the rich, from all the different American Indian tribes here. You have such a rich and interesting history and folklore that comes from them, and then everybody that came in, that the European settlers come in, they bring their own stories with them. Before Neil Gaiman went off the rails or whatever, but when you think about American gods and that confluence of, it was interesting that he picked, the house on the rock in Wisconsin to be the place for all those gods to meet. And he's coming as a European to the United States. He lived near the Twin Cities for a long time. And it is that mix of this, the fascinating and Native American and American Indian folklore and mythology and beliefs, then combine, and you have the European settlers coming in from all over, from Germany, from Sweden, from Norway, from my people, the Polish, the French, and it just, everybody just jumps in and jams into this area, and it all kind of just mixes up, and little pieces kind of get remembered and get believed, and it all just kind of meshes and forms like a lasagna over the land of all these beliefs and all these people that come in. And so then it all kind of blossoms at some point, and we all get to share in that heritage and enjoy it. So I think that's what makes the Midwest particularly interesting, because we're at this great time where it's still less than a couple of hundred years that all these European settlers have been, and then we have hundreds of years and millennia of really great tribal folklore and beliefs to work with that are about the land and the places we're at. And so it just becomes, it really is a melting pot of beliefs and mythology, and then the new ghost stories being created all the time. So I think that's what does it. I think that's what makes us weird. It's all thrown in together like a big stew.
And you bring up an interesting point, that there are all of these different cultures with different belief systems, and many of them are very ceremonial in the way that they treat things. So just because they came from Ireland or Scotland doesn't mean when they made their way here to the United States, they're going to stop believing in the fairy folk.
No, that's right.
You have to realize that maybe all of these different indigenous beliefs around the world, they are all separate. But when you come in and your culture opens the door to your belief systems and begins leaving treats for the fairy, the fae, the wee people, the whatever, and all of these different creatures that are known to exist in all these different lands, right? We do become the great melting pot, not only of humanity, but of the supernatural.
Well, and exactly, you say when the people come over and they bring over some of these stories, you think about, and I'm thinking about what's called the driftless area of Wisconsin. The driftless area is kind of where the glacier stopped. And it's west and southwest here of Madison, where I am, kind of where the glacier stopped. And it's a very unique in its landscape and its beauty. It's different than the rest of Wisconsin. And it also had a huge amount of lead and lead mines. And so that's where Wisconsin badgers come from. Not that we have a ton of badgers running around Wisconsin. What we had was all these Welsh miners coming over in the 1840s, and I think it was something like at least like 10,000 just coming from the Britain itself, coming over to Wisconsin in the every year in the 1840s to work on the mining. And so they were dirt poor. They couldn't afford anything. They couldn't afford decent housing, and so they would build these hovels into the side of the hills in the driftless area, and that's where they'd live. And sometimes that's where their families would live. And so people would derisively call them badgers because they built these hovels in the side of the hills like badger dens.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so they took that as a term of pride, and that's right, we're badgers. And so that's why when Wisconsin was looking for a nickname, Wisconsin Badgers and the Badger State. It didn't come from, we had badgers running around. In fact, I thought I saw a badger like a couple of months ago, and people were like, there's not enough badgers around here for that. It came from these miners, and the fact that lead mining was such a huge part of the state in its formative years. But the reason I bring that up is what they brought over with them, which is the idea of the Tommyknockers in the mines, that they would, there'd be these little creatures in the mines, and sometimes you would hear a knock, or sometimes you would hear somebody off in an empty tunnel. And sometimes the Tommyknockers would give you the warnings of if the mine's about to collapse, if something's about to happen, if things are about to get dangerous, if water's going to flood in, all these different. And so we have these legends in the mines and the tunnels of the Tommyknockers from the driftless area in Wisconsin, but that was brought over by these Welsh and other miners from Cornwall coming in and bringing their culture. They didn't just bring their culture; they brought their monsters.
That's very cool. Very weird, but very cool. So,
right.
Talk to me. I mean, when you think of America, we're not really the monster capital. We're a Bigfoot kind of world. We've got some of that going on, but you really don't think of the monsters. But there is legends and lore of vampires and shapeshifters, and of course, you've got skinwalkers and many different beasts that are known to walk this area. The Wendigo is always one that seems to capture people's attention. It was brought to my attention through the Pet Cemetery book. Stephen, the story that he wove around that absolutely terrified me as a youngster. And talk to us a little bit about that. And where does the Wendigo culture spread? Is it all across the United States, or I know it's big in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Canada, things like that. What can you tell us?
Well, it's definitely there from all of the places where they had Algonquin-speaking peoples of the American Indian tribes. So everywhere, like the Ojibwe was, obviously huge in Wisconsin. And one of our tours in Bayfield, Wisconsin, we go talk about a place called Madeline Island, which is part of the Apostle Islands, which is this island chain, right? That's where you're going to want to escape if there's a zombie apocalypse or anything like that. The Apostle Islands is going to be the first place to go, because there are these, very few people live there. And it's just this, plus it gets really cold. And so you're going to have a great view if you get the high ground. But no, that's where I'm going if there's a zombie apocalypse. But Madeline Island is the closest Apostle Island to Bayfield, which is on Lake Superior. And it's one of our great haunted history tours. And my sister, Allison Jorlin, she really went in to start investigating and finding new stories of Bayfield. And she found some really interesting stuff about the Wendigo, particularly there. And so Madeline Island in the Ojibwe language was called the home of the golden-breasted woodpecker. So that's not the scariest name.
No.
But there's been a whole bunch of books and stories written about it that say that Madeline Island is a place of evil spirits, sacrifice, and cannibalism. Now, I myself have been to Madeline Island and enjoyed a few spirits, so I can tell you they're not evil. But definitely, there's a book called The History of the Ojibwe People from 1885, written by this guy named William Whipple Warren. And he says that the Ojibwe elders say that the Ojibwe people left Madeline Island because there just got to be too many European settlers in the area, and they wanted to go do their own thing. But he has a claim that it's more about evil shamans and the ghosts of cannibalized sacrificial victims, because that's what the Wendigo was. It was the monster, right? We just made that joke about the zombie apocalypse, right?
Right.
But it's the monster that you turn into if you eat human flesh. So when you think about the places where the Algonquin people, speaking people lived, they lived in this northern, Wisconsin, Minnesota, the Dakotas. This area gets really cold. And when you get famine in wintertime, you start to get hungry. And so what happens on days on end when you can't find the prey to hunt? You start thinking about your neighbor. Okay, well, it's not just that movie Alive or whatever, where those, the South American soccer players eat the people in the who died in the plane crash. It would be if you caused the plane crash so you could eat some people. And so once you taste that human flesh, the idea is then that insatiable hunger won't leave you after that. And that's when you slowly start to get turned into this monster whose heart ends up being made of ice. And it's a hunger that will never leave you. So, I mean, there you have that societal warning, right? That, if you break this most sacred of taboos, not only are you you're a real jerk, pal, but you're gonna turn to this monster who can never turn back. And we have this, one of the first entries about the Wendigo come from the Jesuit Relations and Allied Documents, which is, you have these French settlers and missionaries and explorers and fur trappers coming into this area in the 17th century, and they want to trade with the natives and start meeting people. And so you have a missionary who recounts the following news about some Indian allies from the Cree who agree to work with them, and they agree to work with the French, but then they meet this terrible fate. After suffering through a winter famine, extreme hunger had turned these former allies into Wendigo, and they've been put out of their misery by the other members of their tribe. And the only cure for becoming a Wendigo was death. According to what the Jesuit wrote, these poor men were seized with an ailment unknown to us, which makes them so ravenous for human flesh that they pounce upon women, children, and even upon men like veritable werewolves, and devour them voraciously without being able to appease or glut their appetite, ever seeking fresh prey, and the more greedily, the more they eat. They were slain in order to stay the course of their madness. And so we have this, this report that they get from their, that these missionaries get from their friends that, okay, sorry, some of our friends decided to eat human flesh and went wild, and we had to put them down. And it's this idea that this insatiable, this insatiable hunger that you get from tasting the forbidden flesh for the first time. And that ends up being, well, it's not just flesh that can do it to you. It's greed in itself. It's selfishness in itself that can turn you into that creature with a heart made of ice. And when you see him on TV and stuff and in movies, the Wendigo looks like a big deer man or something like that. But that's kind of for the movies to give it that kind of forest Native American, what we imagine Native American monsters would be, which be like a giant deer or something like that.
But I thought there was some of the pictograms and imagery that the Native Americans and indigenous peoples had left behind that matched some of these stories of these large humanoid creatures with antlers, that was part of their fears, that this is what would happen. These creatures would slake their thirst and then just continue to grow in power. They definitely did that. Yeah, they definitely did the idea of it become so. As you get hungrier, you get thinner and you get taller. And so you think about this, like how people think about the Slender Man as that thin, evil kind of creature. And so it's got a distorted face. Think about the Slender Man, drained of all color except for its bloody mouth, and then it's got parts of its own body that had begun to eat. So some of these pictograms you're talking about, so maybe it eats off its own digested thing, it tries to digest its own fingers and everything because it gets so hungry, it even consumes parts of themselves. Naked teeth revealed by chewed lips that have been gnawed away, gnarled fingers clutching claws after all the flesh of their hands has been digested. And this is what you turn into if you eat this flesh. And it's, we have obviously a terrible real life story of someone in the 1870s who is actually suffered from what they call Wendigo psychosis, which would be the psychiatric diagnosis for it.
But it's a guy named Swift Runner, and let me tell you about him. So Swift Runner is a Cree trapper hunter, and he's a former member of the Mounties, right? So he used to be part of the Northwest Mounted Police. He's a native that, joined the Mounties in Canada, and this is the 1870s. He's living in Alberta, north of Edmonton, and he's known in his community. He's a respected figure. People like him. He was a Mountie until 1878. That year, he takes his wife, 6 kids, his mother, and his brother into a remote forest to hunt and trap for the season. That was just what they did over the winter. They go into the forest, they live together, they hunker down, they do some hunting, they do some trapping, and they survive together. When that winter ends, though, only Swift Runner is the guy that comes back into town. He tells the police, "Oh yeah, my entire family died of starvation, and I only survived." But they thought he didn't look like someone who starved himself. In fact, he appears healthy, well-fed, and he's right. He's like, everybody died of starvation except me, and he's looking fine. So they decide to, check it out. And when they do, they find human bones scattered around the site, evidence that the bodies have been butchered and cooked. They find a pot full of human fat and bones broken open, presumably to extract the marrow. And so he's got to confess that he murdered and ate his family over that harsh winter of 1878. And the worst part is the last one to die was his youngest son. And with his youngest son, he had already caught other game before. Like he'd already found, I think, some ducks that he was able to capture and kill and eat. And he didn't need to kill his son. And so
he had developed that Wendigo taste.
Right. It wasn't just that's the thing about cannibalism. It's never really just about being hungry. It's always something more. And so he himself insisted he'd been possessed by the spirit of that Wendigo. And so he gets tried and convicted in Fort Saskatchewan in 1879. He confessed. He said he even, they said he even joked with the priest before his execution. And he is the first man legally executed in Alberta, hanged in 1879 with the Wendigo. And so it's that, that idea that Wendigo psychosis, people talk about lycanthropy and people that convince themselves that they're werewolves.
Right.
Well, and obviously this is all controversial, and I am not a psychiatrist, although I can play one on TV. But it's that idea, though, that you think you are the monster. You make yourself believe you are the monster. And he certainly did. And some tribes even believe that the Wendigo was contagious, so that it could be, by talking about it, you called to it. It's one of the we have a couple more of those coming, but it's one of those monsters where you dare not even say the name.
Right.
And I mean, I remember, Dave, talking to you at the Chicago Paranormal Conference at Ursula's, one of Ursula's Ghost Cons in like 2015. And you just finished interviewing it's 10 years ago now, holy cow. But you just finished interviewing the priest that worked on the demon house.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Father Maginot. Yeah.
Yeah. And nice guy. Right. And he goes, he had some ideas of the name of some of the demonic entities that he encountered in that house.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he typed in one and did like a Google search or something. And then the computer turns off, the printer starts acting funny, all the things start going crazy. And I remember at that party or whatever, was a few Guinness in, and I was like, all right, you got to tell me what that name is. And you're like, hell no. I got to tell you what that name is. Like, we dare. And at the time I was like, that's silly. And, years later, I'm thinking, yeah, why in all these cultures, you have the same thing. If you don't have to say the name, don't.
Right.
Um,
Why give it power? Why give into it? Whether it's a psychosis, right? And you and I have seen this on live investigations. Somebody hears something and they overreact, and suddenly everybody sweeps through with panic. And you see that in little ways like that. So you can only imagine if you start feeding the beast, whether it's a real or imagined creature, the psychological effect it can have on the populace can actually upset the balance of nature.
Absolutely. And so, and that's this idea. Malcolm Gladwell has a really excellent, I don't know if if he adapted it from one of his articles, but he did a presentation on it where he talks about how that, the idea of school shootings and the mass killings come in, and you don't really have that until the first idea is brought forth in the Columbine shooting.
Right.
Is the first one, and that's what everybody hears about it. That's where, it becomes a focus on the news, and all of a sudden you're giving, thousands of disturbed people across the country an idea they didn't have before.
Right.
This idea like, oh, I can take vengeance. I can get my name. I get my name like, Dylan Harris and Eric Klebold. And so, or their name, I might have their names reversed. I apologize.
Right, yeah, I get you.
But, so I think about that idea virus, the mimetic value of those kinds of you don't want to say an idea is dangerous because this is the United States and we should be able to argue about things and every idea and be able to shoot down the bad ones or the ones that are evil and things. But if you don't have to talk about it, why do you?
Yeah, we need to take a break. When we come back, I want to jump into kind of some of the American territories, the Puerto Rico, talking about the Virgin Islands, some places that maybe people are not as familiar with the legend and lore and creatures as we continue with American horror stories. Our guest tonight is Mike Huberty. He is with American Ghost Walks. We have a link for that on today's program guide. So the next time you're going to go traveling and you want to find the best source for the best history and mysteries, check out American Ghost Walks. We'll be back with more right after this.
Hello, Darklings and my fellow mind travelers. This is Mark Allen Lanou, the Gemini Mind. Come take a journey with me through this place we call life by picking up a copy of my book, Reality Was Once the Tapestry of the Dreamer, available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon online. You can find the links also on my website, markallenlanou.com. Chock full of stories about organized crime, the paranormal, my music career, NASA, and more. So go pick up your copy, and you all rock. Indeed.
A new year is rapidly approaching, which means it's time to stop letting last year's chaos rent space in your head and in your heart. This is the season of new everything. New life, new love, new confidence, new jobs, and new chances to finally become the best version of you that you've dreamt of. And the universe? Well, it's practically standing on your lawn with a giant cosmic boombox blasting messages meant just for you. You just need the right conduit. And that's where Love and Lotus Tarot with Winnie Schrader comes in. Winnie doesn't just read cards. She translates destiny. He helps you see the opportunities lining up, the patterns trying to repeat, and the new beginnings that are already forming behind the scenes. Right on the heels of New Year comes Valentine's Day, which means love is in the air, or at least it should be. And if your love life has been more like a blue screen of death error, romance not found, don't panic, my friends. The universe is already trying to nudge you in the right direction. The cards are ready to be shuffled, your story is ready to turn the next page, and your next beginning is closer than you think. Book your reading now, or better yet, buy a reading for a friend. Visit lovelotustarot.com and start the year the way it deserves, with clarity, confidence, and maybe even finding the love that you deserve. That's lovelotustarot.com. Your destiny awaits. All right, my darklings, let me tell you this before we jump back in. We just get done talking about the Wendigo scenario, the cannibalism. Already, all of you have filled my email box with the news story that broke today that reportedly McDonald's is being sued because there's actually no rib meat within the McRib. I have some scarier news for you. You realize there's absolutely no ham in their hamburgers either. So I don't care. Stop sending me. It's delicious. I'm going to eat it anyway. but I appreciate your watching my back. We're back with Mike Huberty, our guest this evening, as we continue discussing American horror stories. Now let's kind of take us for a leap, a little bit out of maybe our roundhouse of stories that we may be familiar with. Mike, let's go to the Virgin Islands. What's going on out there, the U.S. Virgin Islands?
Oh, man. Virgin Islands is one of our latest tour destinations, and St. Thomas has really been a joy to explore because, you think, oh, it's just going to be the beach and it's going to be beautiful. And yes, it absolutely is. But like Wisconsin or like Minnesota, there's a million weird things if you just scratch underneath the surface a little bit, and you have hundreds of years of folklore and fascinating stories. You have Fort Christian, which is the surviving Danish fort that's in Charlotte Amelia, which is the capital of the U.S. Virgin Islands on St. Thomas. And Fort Christian, built 1672, and it's the center of the Danish military there, for the first several hundred years. It's also like the oldest standing prison on United States territory. It started being a prison in 1672, and it was a prison all the way up to the 1980s. And so it's got that interesting history. It's got an experimental lab where the guy that invented the sensory deprivation tank, John C. Lilly, and you guys, if you're not familiar with the sensory deprivation tank, just think that tank that Eleven goes in Stranger Things when she wants to go to the upside down. That's the sensory deprivation tank. And John C. Lilly invents it. He goes down to the Virgin Islands and he wants to study dolphins. And NASA funds one of his studies so that we can try to talk to dolphins, because they think it's going to be useful to eventually try to talk to extraterrestrials. And so you got a woman living with a dolphin, like in a house with 2 feet or 3 feet of water on so that she could walk around and the dolphin would come and be able to swim and live with her. And she's got hours of her just trying to talk to it and recordings where she's speaking to a dolphin, seeing if it can speak English back to her. I mean, that's where Sequest got the idea of the talking dolphin from. Anyway, all that stuff happens on St. Thomas. The Mamas and the Papas, that's where they wrote McGuinn and McGuire just to getting higher in LA, where it's at. And they got a song called Creaky Alley based on this place called Creaky Alley. And there's a whole legend about the Creaky family and gold. And anyway, I'm really excited about that place because I think there's a ton of paranormal stuff that people don't know. And I love showing it to them. And I love when our awesome tour guides take people out to these places and get them just as excited about the history and mystery as I am.
It's interesting. You bring up the infinite need or want and desire to communicate with dolphins, because maybe it'll help us communicate with extraterrestrials. A lot of people may not realize that there has been a very healthy belief. First of all, we know that dolphins were land dwellers at one time. Right. And we know that in their flippers, there are phalange, folks, finger bones. So we know that these things have evolved. And when you think of the quintessential alien figure, it's gray. It's got the big black doll eyes, the little slit for a mouth, right?
Right.
And many people believe that the Greys adapted and went from danger zone of maybe the dinosaurs and the things that were on the ground and took to the water source, which would also explain why we have underwater bases and things along that nature. So as strange as it sounds, there must be a reason that they wanted to talk to dolphins in order to one day hope to talk to aliens.
Yeah. And John C. Lilly in the 1940s, he was playing with a dolphin. He's swimming in the ocean or whatever, and he thinks it says hello to him. And that's where he gets he's like, I think they can speak English. And eventually the research flipped, because we realized, oh, well, dolphins don't have vocal cords. And eventually we started saying, like, well, maybe we can't get them to speak English. Maybe we can start learning how to speak dolphin. And so that's an entire new form of, experimentation that they tried to do. So it's still, that kind of stuff is still going on, but it started in the 60s on this Institute for Communication trans-species
amazing.
communication in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. But
Now, are there any specific creatures or maybe chilling stories of ghosts or something that are kind of unique to that area as well?
well, the West Indies is interesting because you have another confluence of cultures. You have the culture of the Arawak and the Taino Indians who had the natives who had lived in that area. Then you've got the Spanish who start settling the whole thing, and Christopher Columbus he's the one who named the Virgin Islands. You have the Danish who eventually come over and take it. You have the English who conquered the Danish for a little bit and had it. And you have the enslaved people that they brought over and all the West African lore that they bring with them. And so it's this other place where things start mixing together and they become their own thing over time as as the West Indian culture develops. And so I think some of my favorite characters from that culture are the Jumbies. And we were talking.
But are we talking Mecca Lecca High, Mecca Heine Ho, Jumbie?
Not Jambi.
Oh, not Jambi, Jumbie. Okay.
Not Jambi, but Jumbie. But these are the colorful characters who haunt the Caribbean. And there's a book in the brief history of the Virgin Islands in their folklore section, and they describe the Jumbies as, quote, the ghosts of animal forms that meander about lanes and streets. Some are headless or legless spirits. Others are formless shapes that flit about in the dark. And they're kind of, when we talk about the Wendigo, the spirit of things, the Tommyknockers, the spirit of things, it's more than just an individual ghost or a demon or it's more than, like, let's say it's the ghost of my grandma that comes back and shows up. It's more like a force of nature. And so, like we talk about the Wendigo. And so, some believe that, these could be spirits that or creatures that had come back after they had an untimely death, if they were wicked. We talk about werewolves and things, but or ancient spirits that always roamed. But here's just a couple that they kind of are the most popular. The good one is the Baku. And a lot of the times the Baku would be a little small goblin kind of a statue that you brought into your house. And so you would feed it milk and bananas. The idea is that Baku represents, it could bring good fortune.
Interesting. My grandson's getting dropped off in the morning and he likes milk and bananas. So I will have to start nicknaming him Baku and see if he responds.
And just like with your grandson, if you neglect the Baku, misfortune follows.
That's true as well.
So you have this, it's this idea, like, when you think of household spirits or household saints and things, you have those things that that they bring you luck, they bring you fortune. And so the Baku is that kind of more friendly Jumbie. And that's okay, let's keep them happy.
Sure.
So the Duppy is more of, we think of a classical ghost. It's a restless spirit that haunts graveyards and lonely roads, and it sometimes appears as a shadowy figure. So a Duppy is the sad soul that can't move on, that can't cross towards the light. And so that's more of our traditional, what we think of when we think of someone that just, like, why are they still here? Why are they knocking on the window? Why do I see that shadow in the corner or in that chair of someone that just can't move on? But then there's the Cowfoot woman. And La Dabliesa is how they refer to her in Trinidad or Tobago. She's a beautiful woman with one human foot and one cow's hoof, and she lures men to their doom in the forest.
Because men love a good cow hoof, huh?
Well, they can't see the cow hoof. She keeps it under their dress.
I know.
And it's great. For the Miss Universe pageant this year, it was great because they had it in end of September. And actually the U.S. Virgin Islands representative in Miss Universe, when they had a whole costume section, she went as the Cowfoot woman this year because it was close to Halloween. So that was fun to see. But that's one of those stories that's really rooted in that the mixture of West African and the French Creole and the European folklore that, that all comes into that area to make the gumbo of what these beliefs are. And so you have a 19th century traveler who's writing about his travels, Lafcadio Hearn, in the 1880s. And he describes people talking about the Cowfoot woman as a seductress with a beautiful body, but a disfigured face and a single cloven hoof. And so she's a long flowing dress, a traditional garb sometimes that conceals her deformity, a wide brim hat or a veil that hides part of her face. And she's got a supernatural ability to seduce men or lure children into danger. So there's one story in the Virgin Islands and talks about a boy named Reggie. And his grandmother frequently warns him to behave, saying, listen to what your mommy say, do whatever she say do. Listen to what your mommy say, or Cowfoot woman gonna come for you. So Reggie dismisses his grandmother's warning, whatever, grandma, takes a shortcut through a dark alley one evening, and he hears the sound of the step, scrape, clop, step, scrape, clop. And as the noise gets closer, he realizes that something is dragging a hoof behind them. He panics, runs, collides into his grandmother, who sensed danger, and she came to find him. She wards off the entity with a lit cigar, explaining that the Cowfoot woman detested the smell of tobacco. That's actually something in Alaska stories too. There's a creature called the Kushtaka, who also does the same kind of thing, a shapeshifter that lures people into their doom. And one of the ways you can get rid of it is that tobacco. It's that ritual. We think of tobacco as like, oh, that guy's just lighting up a cigarette, or you could light up a cigar but tobacco is this, it comes from people having these ceremonies where they would burn it, and it's much more of a ceremonial thing than just having a smoke break. It's and so it's that little ceremony. So tobacco scares off the Cowfoot woman. And another account is a man walking home late at night. He spots a woman he believes to be his great grandmother. And so he follows her, and he notices something unusual. He's calling to her, she's not responding. He finally catches up, and then he sees the cow hoof where her foot should be. She stops, and then the man turns and runs as fast as he could. And so it's that idea that, you got to be careful. Something's going to lure you in from the darkness. If you see a dark area and you see someone trying to seduce you in, if it's a beautiful woman, if it's someone if it's your grandmother, if it's things like that, you got to run. And it's right. There's almost these societal warnings. I don't know if
there's the belief system too that the demonic realm will try to take on a visage of something appealing or familiar, and the kind of one hook is that they can never fully take on or adapt. That's why some of these spirits look perfect in form, but then they have a hooked hand or they've got the cloven foot. It's always like one part of them is not allowed to fully adapt, and that's our sign to watch for, so that we're not taken advantage of. And that's been a part of the demonic and demonology and exorcism realm as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, it's interesting that, we're talking about this, this Virgin Islands, West Indian kind of monster. I was just talking about a monster from Alaska. And now you just go to Waukesha, Wisconsin. And then you've got this creature from the Slavic immigrants to the Midwest that they called the Waterman. And this is preserved by a researcher from the University of Wisconsin named Charles Brown, and part of the Works Progress Administration under the New Deal, where they were trying to give people jobs and things during the Depression. His job was to go and preserve the folklore and legends of the native tribes of Wisconsin, and then the recent transplants from Europe. And he talks about this Waterman who lives in a hidden lair in the deepest part of the river. Walks and talks like a normal man. He's got a cloak that's split in the back, but you can recognize him by the handkerchiefs in his pockets because they're always dripping wet. And fishermen who worked in the river would claim that the Waterman leads people to their death and can even entrap them with one of the hairs of his mustache. right? So that's the thing, that something's wrong with his mustache, something's wrong with the handkerchiefs in his pocket. And it's always interesting to see these kind of cross-cultural cross-cultural similarities between peoples that would have nothing to do with each other. But
Right.
we all have those same fears, and we all have those same respect for sometimes supernatural forces. One of the Jumbies in the Virgin Islands is the lagahoo, and that comes from the French word for werewolf is the loup-garou.
Right.
And then I think in the more Cajunized version is like the rougarou.
Right.
And so they've got their own one where they talk about the lagahoo in the Virgin Islands. And there's one legend that talks about a native woman who marries an old retired Danish soldier. Now she wakes one night and she finds that her husband is missing from his bed. She goes to look for him and she's frightened. She can't speak when she sees him writhing and twisting serpent-like on the floor. While she watched him, he crept out of his natural skin and assumes the pelt of a wolf, then leaps through an open window. She screams when she sees that. The neighbor comes over and he tells her to burn the human skin. She didn't do so, but she salts it. And then when the creature comes back, she sees it come in. It grabs its human skin, and then he disappears forever. The lagahoo, and they've got a very famous like landmark in Charlotte Amelia on St. Thomas, and it's called the 99 Steps. And they have all these. It's a really hilly city, and so they created all these step streets so that you could build houses on the hills and people could go up to them. And the 99 Steps is the most famous of the step streets. And it's not really 99 steps. It's like 103 or something like that. But the reason they called it that is it's like if you're being chased by a vampire or a werewolf, the idea was that they were kind of OCD. And so that, if you poured salt behind you, they had to stop and then count every grain of salt when they did that so you could get away. So when the English had temporarily taken over the island, one of the legends was that, these English are really werewolves. They're really lagahoo. And so if you find yourself getting chased by one, or if you get in trouble and the English soldiers find you, go to the 99 steps and run up it. Because if you run up it, he's going to have to count each step before he can continue chasing you. So that's the way you get away from the lagahoo.
Oh, very cool. Mike Huberty, our guest tonight. And if you want to hear more stories like this while you're out traveling abroad, keep checking for American Ghost Walks. They've got tours all over, like I said, from Alaska to Hawaii to the Virgin Islands to Puerto Rico to Minnesota to Maine. Lots of great tours out there to go check out. We have to take another quick break. When we come back, let's go to Puerto Rico. Let's hear about that. And you also have a strange encounter that involves a UFO and a downed plane. We'll talk about that when we return. We've got so much more on our plate right here on your home for everything paranormal. I'm Dave Schrader, and this is our Paranormal 60. My darklings, December moves pretty fast. All the outings, the parties, the shopping, the travel, the did we actually wrap everything chaos? But once the noise dies down, there's always that one moment that I look forward to most. Slowing down, cozying up, and just being present with the people I love. And that's exactly why I keep going back to Cozy Earth. Their bamboo sheets, made from viscose from bamboo, are the best gift of better sleep I've ever given, and the best gift I've ever given myself. They're incredibly soft. They sleep cooler, and somehow they make crawling into bed feel like you're slipping into a luxury retreat. And if you've got someone on your list who desperately needs rest, or if that someone is you, this is the gift that says, take a breath. You deserve this. And then there's the bubble cuddle blanket. I've told you about this. If you want to give a gift that feels more like an experience than a product, like a hug that they can feel from you any time of year, this is the gift. It's got that plush textured feel, just the right weight, and it turns any couch or bed into the coziest corner of the house. Snuggling by the fire, movie nights, maybe even a quiet moment on the couch. this blanket makes all of it better. It's comfort that lingers long after the holidays end. Plus, you get a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. Think about that. Try returning any other bedding after using it for 3 months. That just ain't gonna happen. Cozy Earth stands behind every stitch. So here's the deal. Now, through December 12th, head to CozyEarth.com and use my code P60 for up to 40% off. And order by the 12th for guaranteed Christmas delivery. Listening after that, don't worry, my darklings, the code still works and it's going to get you 20% off year-round. And if you get that post-purchase survey, make sure to mention you heard about Cozy Earth right here on the Paranormal 60. Again, CozyEarth.com. Use my code P60 for up to 40% off through December 12th, 20% off year-round. Give the gift of comfort that lasts beyond the holidays and carries you into a cozy new year. Oh, it's time to take a drink because I'm going to talk about the Palmer House Hotel. If you're looking for a place where great food, cold drinks, live music, and unforgettable experiences come together, come eat, stay, and play at the Palmer House Hotel, Restaurant, and Pub in Sauk Center, my new home. This weekend, join us for Ghost Stories, Inc., featuring ghost investigations, presentations, incredible art, and more. It's an experience you will not forget. And then keep the fun going with live music from the 6040 Band on January 23rd, playing great covers of all your favorite songs, followed by national recording artist and good friend of the show, Katie Hart, performing February 6th and 7th, inviting you to sing along to some of the greatest hits of the past 40 years. Visit our website or Facebook page for details, or call now to book your room and meet me, Dave Schrader, and the great employees of the Palmer House Hotel, Restaurant, and Pub. Our phone number is 320-351-9100. That's 320-351-9100. The people and the spirits of the Palmer House Hotel await you, and I look forward to your next visit. Our friend Mike Huberty has joined us tonight on the program, and we are talking American horror stories, real-life tales from all around the United States, and some of the locations and places maybe you wouldn't have thought of. Like, let's go to Puerto Rico, where we've got some interesting stories to tell. And what have you got for us there, Mike?
Well, obviously San Juan, and an old San Juan specifically in Puerto Rico is, one of the oldest cities in the entire Western Hemisphere, and so it's really fun to go there because you're on American soil. It's a U.S. territory, but in the U.S. you can use U.S. dollars, and Spanish is still the official language, but almost everybody speaks English, and everybody's got there's such a huge Puerto Rican culture on the mainland. Every city has a Puerto Rican community and everything, and so you feel like you're walking through a colonial Spanish town, and it's in the U.S. So it's really crazy, and it's very it's very transporting when you're there, and that's it already puts you in the mood. You have these two forts at the edge of the ocean and a beautiful cemetery in the middle, and one fort was built, started in the 16th century. The others, started 100 years later, but they're both facing the Atlantic, and it makes you feel like you're in a movie there, and it really is transporting. But they're not just facing the Atlantic Ocean; they're facing the Bermuda Triangle. And so the Bermuda Triangle stretches from Miami to the island of Bermuda in the middle of the Atlantic, and then it goes west over to San Juan, and that's the Devil's Triangle. And it obviously starts being a mysterious place in 1945, and that's that Flight 19 where 5 torpedo bombers vanish, and the 13-man crewed boat sent to look for them. Steven Spielberg used them in
Close Encounters.
Right, that's the whole idea. Is they finally find the crew. They finally find the planes 30 years later. But you get to 1980, and this is what I think is one of the most convincing, besides that initial, Flight 19, this is probably the most convincing, like Bermuda Triangle-ish kind of story that I can think of. And it's a guy named Jose Maldonado Torres. He's got a tiny plane, and he's in the Dominican Republic in Santiago. And he's going to fly back to San Juan. As he gets back into Puerto Rican airspace, the official report states that he's complaining about a weird object that he can see. And he said it's interfering with his navigational equipment. Then, on the recording, you hear somebody in the back saying, "What is that thing?" and stuff. Well, the signal goes dead. The plane is never seen again.
Wow.
2 people disappeared, both the people in the plane. The father of the other passenger on the plane was an assistant chief in the Puerto Rico Aero Police, and he's a pilot himself. So he goes in, and he's leading one of the flights searching for his son. In his personal affidavit from his investigation, he talks about how they describe the object as glowing and how there's something strange out there and weird that they saw. And that's one of the interesting things is you can still go on YouTube and you can listen to his actual, they have the recording.
Flight deck recording, yeah.
Of his Mayday signal.
Wow.
That they recorded. And so you have that where they say, oh, the equipment stops working, and then all of a sudden they say Mayday, they see something strange in the sky, something weird's happening. It just goes bing, and then the flight completely disappears. And if the plane's never found, those people are never seen again. And it's not something that happened. We read a lot of these stories and you're like, well, that happened in the 1920s, or, that happened 200 years ago. And so who knows what kind of game of telephone people are playing since then, and how the story grows over time. I mean, this is something investigated by the Federal Aviation Administration. It happens in my lifetime, right? 1980. Your lifetime, Dave. I don't want to say how old you are. I don't know. But those little things, and we're always looking for the real uncanny stuff.
Right.
And so that to me was, when I think about every now they're like, well, the Bermuda Triangle, it's all coincidences, it's all BS. Sure, that might be true, but that just was a real mysterious thing that happened, and it wasn't people who were out there looking. It wasn't ghost hunters looking for something. It wasn't UFO guys saying, I want to see a submersible object or whatever. It was just regular guys trying to get home, and somehow they disappeared, and something crazy happened to them on the way, and it's completely unexplained.
We've only got a little bit of time left together. I wanted to hear a good chupacabra story. I love that kind of stuff, and I know that you've got some. And before we leave, if you could give me a good chupacabra, and what do you think is probably the creepiest ghost story from America you've ever heard?
Well, when it comes to the chupacabra, it goes back to 1975, even before, the chupacabra is huge in 1995, right? Remember, it's right after the movie Species comes out, funny enough. Oh. And the first description of a chupacabra is exactly the alien from Species. And so it's like, oh, that's funny. Like somebody sees the movie and then they're like, oh no. But then you find out that 1975, they've got this thing called the Vampire of Mocha. And Mocha is a small town on the island. And it does the same thing that people said the chupacabra did. Hunts down much larger prey, bringing down full-grown cows. Like the chupacabra means goat sucker. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that it sucks a livestock animal completely drained of blood. And people were thinking that in 1975, this thing was a giant boa constrictor or crocodiles illegally released into the waterways. And so, these things start happening again 20 years later, and they start happening in San Juan and in some of the towns surrounding San Juan. So in 1995, real people suffer economic losses from these chupacabra attacks. And people are going out there, there's hunting expeditions, and there's a book now that has all of these stories that were in the Puerto Rican newspapers in English. And it came out a few years ago, and I started reading them. And you have like the mayor of Caravanas, which is a city near San Juan, Jose Ramon Soto Rivera. And he's talking, he's like, we went to the Department of Natural and Environmental Resources to complain that nothing was being done. The mayor's like, it's a real situation that's causing damage. People's livestock were being killed. The blood was being drained. And he's like, people were very worried. And as mayor, I had to do something. So he goes to federal agencies. They get ignored. He goes to the governor, Pedro Rosello at the time. He gets ignored. Most government authorities disregarded the monster reports as evidence of some kind of mass hysteria. And, some people and some police took it seriously and they went out. Nobody ever actually caught the chupacabra. And the attacks died down a little bit after the mid 1990s. And, it started being, then all of a sudden people started seeing a chupacabra in Texas and saying it was some kind of mangy coyote and everything. But the original chupacabra creature that they were seeing in Puerto Rico in the mid 1990s, that was, draining the blood of their livestock animals, wasn't a mangy coyote. It was like a lizard-like beast. It was an alien-looking kind of beast that was doing it. And so people were afraid that, what is this thing? Is it something on the, it's some ancient creature from the island, like some kind of dinosaur or something? Or is it something that escaped from an experiment?
Right.
Because at all these kind of military bases in the area, you have an entire part of the island of Vieques, which is off the coast of Puerto Rico. That was half the island was just for bombing runs. So you can go to the island now and you can check it out. And it's amazing beaches and it's like wild horses and stuff. Really is something special. But there's half of the island you can't go to because you might walk on unexploded ordnance on that side of the island. So the military was conducting experiments there. And so who knows what kind of chimeras they were putting together. But if they did, well, it may have had a taste for goat blood.
Well, and you know what? We just did a highlight of 2025, the strange news stories from around the United States and around the world. And there are still some really mysterious findings that even the police are taking serious, that they're still finding animals with puncture wounds in the neck, completely devoid of blood. They can't figure out what's causing it. Fascinating. Yeah. What have we got? If you've got, out of all the stories you've heard, is there one ghost story that sticks with you above and all before we say goodbye? I always like a good, creepy story to kind of sling at people just before they go close their eyes and try to fall asleep. Let's leave them a little something spooky.
I'll get one from your hometown, Dave.
Okay.
And we talk about this on the Minneapolis Ghost Walk, which starts at Mill Ruins Park. And it starts with and this one always disturbs me. And I think of it when I think of stuff that's not just like, oh, grandma's coming back to say bye, or, right. I was in a car and then I saw my uncle in the rearview mirror and he said, stop. So I hit the stop and I didn't hit somebody. This is one where I was like, I wouldn't want to be there. The Great Mill Disaster of 1878. So if you guys aren't from the Minneapolis area or haven't been downtown, you have these ruins of what were these, amazing, Minneapolis, the Mill City, these amazing mills. And Minneapolis in the 19th century is famous for its mills, but in 1878, you've got the Washburn A Mill right on the shores of the Mississippi River, and it explodes in a fireball, throws the roof of the mill as well as debris 500 feet in the air. 14 men are working on it, and it explodes, and they're killed, and the fire spreads to 2 nearby mills. They also explode, and it kills 4 more people. Eyewitnesses reported it as a stream of fire pouring out the windows. The Minneapolis Tribune said, Minneapolis has met with a calamity, the suddenness and horror of which it is difficult for the mind to comprehend. While rumors spread that it might be an earthquake, it was gases generated by the milling process. They thought it was an earthquake, gases from the milling process, or even that it was a train car loaded with nitro. The real truth is that mill work creates a fine dust always in the air at the mill, like a little fog, and it's highly explosive and flammable. So 2 University of Minnesota professors came to the conclusion that the 2 millstones were dry, rubbed together, and created a spark, and that's all it took to blow up the buildings. It was just highly flammable, and there it went. Now, there's a monument in Lakewood Cemetery erected in 1885 to the 18 men who died that day, but that's not where they rest. When these men died, their flesh and bone were blown to bits, and it's those bits that have haunted the site of the mill there. There's an eyewitness who said he saw what he called, quote unquote, a bits and pieces phantom. He said it was like a miniature tornado of human parts formed, a rotating vortex of flesh and bone that moved slowly across the ruins, and it paused to pull a piece of flesh from the ground into itself. He was so terrified by this weird flesh whirlwind, he held his tongue for years, only to tell children at the end of his life. And it was children that said that their father had seen a horror at the site of the mill ruins, and he witnessed phantoms that all they wanted to be was put back together after they were blown apart in the fire. So when I think of like, oh, we can't move towards the light or things like that, it's constantly searching for the bits of your flesh left behind. Sounds to me like a really terrible way to spend eternity.
Yeah. But you know what isn't? Going on the American Ghost Tours with Mike Huberty and all of the amazing tour guides that he has around the United States and around the world. So if you are looking for some fun at whatever your destination may be, check out American Ghost Tours, or American Ghost Walks rather, and see if there's one in that area. And you'd be surprised. There is some rich, amazing history that demands to be remembered. And you should check these out because there are good people like Mike putting these together. And it is a really fascinating way. Take your kids, because you wrap it in these paranormal stories and possibilities. That's what sticks with children, but they're also learning. And I think it's fascinating. That's why I've grown to love history as an adult even more, is realizing all the high strangeness that surrounds our history in this country and why we need to remember these things. Mike, thank you so much for joining me tonight and doing this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dave. It's always fun to talk to you. And hey, like, stick a quarter in me, right? I love it.
I do too. You're perfect and a great guest all the time. Mike Huberty, we do have a link for American Ghost Walks on tonight's program guide, so please make sure to check it out, my friends. You won't be sorry. There's something unsettling about realizing how little distance there really is between then and now. Not years, not centuries, as Mike explained to us tonight. Sometimes it's just a few steps. Tonight wasn't about haunted houses or spooky stories meant to entertain. It was about geography with a memory problem. Because every city Mike Huberty talked about still exists exactly where it always has. And so did the moments that broke people there. The fear didn't evaporate. The grief didn't move on. It just learned how to blend in with the parking meters, restaurants, and the haunted hotel lobbies. We don't stumble into haunted places by accident. We build around them, and then we act surprised when something pushes back. The unsettling truth is this: most people don't encounter the paranormal because they're searching for it. They encounter it because they're standing somewhere they were never meant to forget. Some stories refuse to stay in the past. Some locations never stop keeping score. And some nights, like this one, remind you that history doesn't whisper, it waits. I'm Dave Schrader. Sleep well or don't, my darklings. Either way, this has been our Paranormal 60.